Not a matter of if, but when crisis will rock your world. I'm Roshini Rajkumar, crisis strategist, licensed attorney, and host of The Crisis Files. In each case file, we explore ripped from the headlines crises and try to find solutions you can use. Eric Brown is managing director of IT Audit Labs. He thrives on creating order from chaos. It's no secret companies are using our personal information to sell us more goods and services. But when harm lurks in your digital relationships, what can you do, especially when it's coming from your favorite brands? Eric is here for the case file I call Surveillance Capital. Eric, a lot to unpack with you today.
Absolutely. And I was thinking about this episode as I was driving over here. I was thinking about how many cameras I was on before I even got here. And it's got to be over 1,000.
Okay,
right?
Now you've made me more paranoid about the drive to the studio. Okay, so get into that a little bit.
Sure. So from the time you wake up, depending on what devices you have in your house, you could have an Alexa device in your house. And that's recording everything that you're saying and sending it up to the cloud for analysis. You could have a Ring camera or other doorbell type of cameras. You could have other surveillance cloud cameras on your house, or your neighbors may have that. So just leaving the house, you're going to be on camera. You could have cameras in your vehicle. So some vehicles are doing attention monitoring, where they're monitoring where your eyes are. Are you looking down? Are you looking ahead? And using that information potentially against you in the event of an accident or something like that. So just by going about the daily course of business, your actions are being recorded, and maybe you don't know that.
Right. So I'm thinking now my car is like a mini police.
Could be. Yeah, it could be. Well, from the Ring camera standpoint, the police have the ability to leverage Ring camera footage if there was an event that occurred in your neighborhood.
Wow. Regardless of whether it had anything to do with your house.
Exactly.
Wow. Just to get that camera what it saw.
Yes.
Okay. So one of the big reasons, my guess, is that all of these brands, whatever they are, want our information is to monetize that digital relationship. Am I correct on that?
Exactly. And we saw this years ago with Yahoo, Google, Microsoft, Hotmail. Hotmail is Microsoft's free email platform. And these companies were taking our information and essentially data mining that information from us. So if you recall Google Photos, where Google said, hey, you can upload photos and we'll store them in the cloud for free that you can access them. And sure, right? You could do that, but why? What's the why behind it?
Yes.
Well, they were taking the information in those photos and creating relationships. So if I'm in a photo, I'm on a boat, I'm holding, say, a beverage, right?
Let's just call it a beer.
I'm holding a beer, right? That's got a brand to it. The boat that I'm on may have a brand to it. The people that are in the photo with me, it's creating those relationships and building that marketing persona, not just necessarily against me, but people of a particular age or race or even venue, because those images have our digital location in them, right? So it knows where you are from a GPS perspective. When you take that in aggregate, so hundreds of thousands of millions of times, you can start to create a pretty good digital persona about individuals and about similar types of individuals.
And individuals who might not even be the customer of that particular monitoring camera or GPS
100%.
system. Just because you're on that boat with that beer in Cancun, Eric, this could happen to you.
Wait, were you watching my photos?
All right, so let's get into some examples of some real brands. Delta, Marriott, Firefox, the browser.
Yes.
What are some things happening with these brands and others like them?
So rewinding the clock maybe 15 or so years ago, maybe a little bit longer, kind of as this was evolving and organizations were figuring out the power of creating these super cookies or this digital information portfolio about their consumers. They were taking this information and in some ways monetizing it. So there was, I believe Orbitz was one, I think Marriott was another. Some of the airlines were doing it where they were inspecting the type of browser that you were coming from, the type of computer that you were coming from, and then monetizing that. And in a few more famous examples, people that were coming from Mac computers were charged a higher price than counterparts coming from a different system, right? If it was a PC. So you and I could be side by side and we're both going to Cancun and we look up the flights. If I'm on a Mac, there were times where I was charged a higher amount. This is years ago. They've since corrected that. I'm sure there's other algorithms.
So there were lawsuits, is my guess.
I would assume so.
Yeah.
But it was just interesting how they were profiling us with that information to make buying decisions and to monetize those traffic streams, because they thought, well, Mac people are spending more on their PC. Maybe they have more of a disposable income, so we're going to charge them more. And they were doing the same thing outside of the type of computer that you were coming from. They were doing the same thing. I think Delta was one that was doing this, where they were charging more for people that were part of their rewards program, because they figure they already have you, right?
You're going to go with them.
Exactly.
All right. So you've taught me the term EULA, E-U-L-A. It's an acronym. What is that?
That's the end user license agreement. So we'll go back to the Ring camera as an example. When you set that camera up, you'll be presented with that end user license agreement that stipulates that how your data can be used. And unfortunately, a lot of the times, these EULA agreements are really long and nobody reads it, right? You're just clicking through. You just want to get the thing set up, right? So you're just clicking through. But that information that's in that EULA stipulates many of the times how that information could be used. Yes, it's important to read the EULA. Most people don't. And there's not a lot that you can do if you disagree with the EULA. It's not like you can redline it and send it off to their attorneys.
Well, is there a part of the EULA we should go look into and study?
With AI now being more
prevalent.
Yes, ubiquitous, right? We can take that EULA, copy it, and take it into something like a ChatGPT or a Perplexity and ask that AI to review the EULA for us and ask it, prompt, right? A prompt is how you talk to the AI. And you could ask that AI, that large language model, what are some things in this EULA that I should be conscious of? What privacy rights am I giving away? And you could tinker with the exact prompts.
Questions.
Yeah. That's the general theme. You could tinker with it to get the answers that you might be looking for.
And that would be a really helpful use of AI.
Absolutely.
Save a lot of time, although it might not hold up in court if you try to take that particular brand to court if your lawyers hadn't read the EULA. So that's just something to keep in mind. The lawyer in me wants to remind listeners of that. Okay, so what about downstream chips? Because those, as you've taught me, are phoning home.
That's a good one.
It just sounds bad.
Well, and there's been a number of examples of this with, say, our Roomba vacuum, right? The little vacuum robot that goes around the house.
Innocent.
But it's got a camera in it. And there have been researchers that have essentially followed the data that the robot, and I can't specifically say that it was the Roomba, but it was a robot vacuum with a camera in it that was providing that information out to a third party. Now, a lot of these are manufactured overseas in China, and a lot of these devices are built with hundreds of other chip components in them. So you may have the entity whose name is on the device, is on that robot, but that robot has hundreds of microprocessors in it that aren't manufactured by the name that's on the robot, right? They source them from other third parties.
So it could have parts from 50 different places.
Easily. And some of those places may be malicious. Recently, within the last 2 to 4 years, could be a little bit longer, the federal government stopped buying networking components from a company called Huawei, which is an organization was started by someone who was in the Chinese military years ago. The Chinese government funded that organization, but the thought was that that organization, which is a very large number 2 or number 1 networking company in the world, so they provide equipment for hundreds of thousands of organizations, but the thought was that they could be inserting chips into these products that then are, quote unquote, phoning home. So I believe the US government and the British government don't allow products from Huawei to be purchased for government purposes. So in my line of work, we often get involved with organizations that are going through a security event or they want to get better at security. One example from a few years ago, went into an organization. They were a Cisco shop. They had a lot of Cisco equipment. Cisco has a distinct color. It's a green box. You can see that when you go into a server room and there's just all of these racks of servers and networking equipment. Some are blue. There's a few that are red. Some are green. Well, Cisco has this distinct green color. So when we're going in and we're doing an assessment of the environment, see all these quote unquote Cisco devices. You say, well, okay, well, can you send us the documentation behind these devices? So we want to look at the serial numbers and we reach out to Cisco because we want to get the warranty information. We want to get information that Cisco has about all of these devices. Well, we sent this list of hundreds of devices to Cisco. Cisco comes back with a report that says there's only about 50 of the devices that we sent were actual Cisco devices.
Wow.
So it's like, well, what's going on here? Well, the company had purchased many of the devices from eBay or a third-party auctioneer. They didn't have the source of where these products came from. And the reason that's bad is because there's a lot of phony technology out there. We call it grayware, gray market, right? Where that technology has been altered. So it looks like a Cisco device. It works like a Cisco device.
But it's not Cisco.
It's not Cisco. So when you work with reputable companies, and let's say we're going to build out an environment that had Cisco switches in it, and we wanted to get a demo of a switch, it's got to be new in box, right? So when we open it, we use it, we say, hey, we like it or we don't like it. When we send it back, they can't send that to another customer because we could have altered it, right?
Correct.
So
wow.
when you're working with a reputable company, any demoware that you get is going to be new in box. And that way you're assured that you are the only one.
And you should make sure of that.
Absolutely.
When you're checking it out and when it comes to you.
And if you're buying something, you might be trying to save a little bit of money on building out your infrastructure. You really should make sure that you've checked that authenticity of
and where it came from. The origin story,
yes.
For sure. All right, so lots of things here. I'm even more scared about what's watching, who's watching, but we can't live in that fear,
we
Eric.
Can't.
So give us some of the ramifications, maybe some worst case scenarios, and then your pro tips for how we can protect ourselves. I don't know if that's the right term, but how we should move forward now that we've heard from you.
Sure. We just have to assume that we are being surveilled all of the time, right? We had some examples earlier where we were talking about devices like our cars that were recording us. And as devices and components become cheaper, that's just going to become more and more ubiquitous as more data is sent to the cloud and managed in the cloud, right? Even your wireless access point, that might be cloud managed. Some of that data might be going to the vendor, and that data might be stored in their cloud environment. And cloud is just essentially another term for somebody else's data center. I think we just have to be cognizant that it's occurring as we get closer and closer to AI and technology just being ingrained in a part of our daily lives. For example, there's wearable technology now that's recording everything that you're saying and then sending that off to a cloud platform for analysis so that you could go back and say, oh, what were my to-dos today? It's a digital assistant, but it's recording everything that you're saying. And obviously you're aware that that's happening, but could others around you, maybe they don't want that to be happening, but it's happening anyway, right? Because you're not going to get consent from the hundreds of people that you interact with.
And my guess is no one's asking for that
No
consent.
one's asking.
They're just doing what they want to do for their own digital assistant.
Even our doorbell cameras as we walk our dogs or what have you, that's recording everything, sound too. So I think we just have to understand that that is happening. And then what we can do about it is maybe be aware that the things that we post online, be aware of what you post online, what you're saying, because you never know how that could potentially be used in the future. And we're really at an interesting time right now because the AI or artificial intelligence, we're able to duplicate our voices using AI. So it sounds just like me. It sounds just like you. And that could potentially be used for good or for malicious intentions. Your parents could get that call that, you're stranded in Mexico and they need to wire $1,000 or whatever it is. But just by hearing your voice, your parents may think that you're in distress, but it's really not even you. It's just an AI recording.
So once again, we got to go back to the safety words or the safety terms. How do we prove that that's you on the other end? I mean, it kind of blows your mind to think about it.
It's making that plan with your family. It's having that discussion at the Thanksgiving table, bringing awareness to our loved ones, our families of what happens in this scenario. If you get a panicked call, then how do we have those safe words that only we know? But there are tons of examples, Roshini, of where people are freely giving away information that might be used as that pet's name or that safety word, right?
Right.
How many
We have to be careful. So the funny thing that comes to mind is when I'm walking our 90-pound dog in the neighborhood, he doesn't often choose to do number 2 near a garbage can, which is what I'd like him to do when we're in the park area. But sometimes that comes later in the walk. And the other day, it was trash day in the neighborhood. So there are all these trash cans around. And I just think to myself, gosh, it would be really easier just throw this in one of the neighborhood trash cans as they're waiting out on the edge to get picked up. And I'm really glad I never have, because there are probably cameras watching me and they would know it was me. So I carry it back and I throw it away at home or I go back to the park. But that's just one, a little trivial, but very real example of what you're talking about here.
The other example could be where you did not pick up after the dog. Now you're on camera.
Well, I always pick up after the dog. The question is, do I put the doo-doo in someone else's trash can or do I take it to the park?
Sure.
I mean, Eric, I'm always picking up after the dog. The dog is 90 pounds. Those are not tiny doo-doos. So believe me, I try to be a good citizen.
Before I want to just bring it back to a couple of things that people can do that we should
want
do
your pro tips
right away. Yeah. One of them is lock your credit. So credit fraud is a huge problem, and it's really painful to unring that bell once it happens. And our credit by default is left open.
And is that something your bank does or each individual card?
That's something that you need to do as an individual with the credit bureaus.
Got it.
So the Equifax, Experian, TransUnion, and Innovis, those 4 bureaus, if you lock your credit with them, it's free to do. You can also get a free credit report to make sure that no credit has been opened in your name. But if you lock that, then if somebody does get a hold of your Social Security number, they can't open up credit in your name. We advise our customers, one of the first things to do is lock your credit. The other one, we were talking about your 90-pound dog. What's his name?
Kodak.
Kodak, okay. What year was Kodak born?
He was born in 2020.
Okay. So, Roshini, what I would postulate is, I know you wouldn't do this, but others may have passwords with Kodak 2020, right?
I would never do that, Eric.
Because it's so easy to do. Pet's name, kid's name, other important...
Street you live on.
Exactly. Using those as passwords. And when we go into organizations, sometimes they ask us, hey, can you test our passwords and see how easy they are to crack? And I don't think I've been in an organization that didn't have passwords that had some derivative of pet's name, kid's name. So when we go in, we coach how to use a password manager, how to have stronger passwords. And there's been some guidance around how to do that, where organizations shouldn't be asking for those 90-day password rotations because that leads to spring 2025, summer 2025, right? Because it's like if they're constantly asking you to change your password, well, you're going to make it something easy to remember. So we advocate using a password manager or doing things like a digital key, things that your organization's security organization can help you with. But as individuals, we've got to make sure that we have multi-factor authentication on our important things like our bank accounts, our social media. We've got to have that second form of authentication. So username, password, and then a form of authentication like you might see from Authenticator or Microsoft Authenticator, where it sends you a message and you have to type in a number.
And sometimes even your fingerprint.
Exactly. So that's key. Those two things, lock the credit, MFA on your important accounts.
All right. Great information from Eric. You can find Eric and his team at itaudit.labs.com. That's itaudit.labs.com. I'm guessing you're going to get an uptick on your website after people hear this episode. Today's case file is powered by Asset HR. Are you seeking more personalized attention than what large payroll companies offer? Asset HR prioritizes your business as if it were their own. They don't just create partnerships, they foster lasting relationships. Imagine a world where your needs are anticipated, every call is promptly answered, and you receive the attention you deserve. Choose Asset HR and experience a human resources partnership where relationships are paramount. Learn more at assethr.com. Rate, review, and subscribe to The Crisis Files on your platform of choice. Follow us on YouTube and Instagram at The Crisis Files. Go to thecrisisfiles.com to check out all 3 seasons of our library of case files. I'm Roshini Rajkumar. Join me next time on The Crisis Files.